Talk. How are you?
Fine, good to see you. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you. Delighted to be on the program. Thank you for inviting me to the tackle. I look forward to our next 2 hours. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to see you. I
How is
actually appreciate
Nairobi?
the honor. I appreciate the fact that you've actually honored our invite to the tackle. You know, you're a great woman who has made moves in East Africa, or is it the whole of Africa actually? Right? So we are pleased to have you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Gerald.
Mm-hmm. I can see you really looking good this morning. You don't look like someone who Museveni has been chasing around for very many years.
What were you expecting to see, Gerald?
You know, someone who has been fighting with a dictator for several years. You can expect you to see them with scars and all. I mean, you're looking nice. Good to see you.
The scars are emotional more than physical.
Wow, sorry about that. Anyway, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the tacklers. You're majorly, I've seen also you have some Ugandans who have joined in, but we have a majorly Kenyan audience and also guys from diaspora.
Right, so perhaps I should share the link to the Facebook Live on my timeline as well.
Sure.
So that we have more Ugandans defending me when the Kenyans accost me, or more Kenyans defending me when the Ugandans come after me.
Actually, Kenyans love you.
Oh, I love Kenyans as well. I love Kenya. It's been my refuge twice now. This is my second time I'm running to Kenya for a refuge. When I was a child, my mother and father had to flee from oppression in our country, Uganda, in the early 80s. And so I lived as a refugee child. That time we were living in Langata in Nairobi in Kenya. And then I've run back to Kenya with my children. So Kenya is a place I love. It's become a refuge, a hiding place for me, as it was for my parents. So I appreciate the love, and I hope that Kenya will be good to my children and I this time as well.
All right. So does that mean then that you guys you have an history of activism as well from your parents, or how did they end up in Kenya as refugees?
My father was a medical doctor. He was heading Mbarara Hospital, National Referral Hospital, when dictator Idi Amin was president of Uganda, and Mbarara National Referral Hospital was on the highway that introduced soldiers from Tanzania. Right, if you remember, our country had a bunch of soldiers working with Obote, and they got into our country and they were fighting against Idi Amin Dada's army. And my father was responsible for leading a hospital that was treating the soldiers that were wounded by the UNLFA army, or the army that Idi Amin headed. And so the dictator at that time held him responsible for restoring life and ability to fight to soldiers who would otherwise have been taken out by the regime. And so he took it personally. And I remember, although I was a child, that a number of doctors were assassinated using bayonets. Wow. Of AK-47s in the late season, just before the civil war in Uganda, and those doctors were at my father's hospital. He was lucky to survive that time because he had traveled to Entebbe, which used to be the headquarters of the Ministry of Health, and so he was not murdered, right? On going back to the hospital, he realized he was on a wanted list of doctors who were also supposed to be butchered. And so he fled. And a short while later, my mother joined him. He came to Nairobi and later went to University of Michigan, and we stayed here. After he'd done his Masters of Public Health, he came back and he was working as a flying doctor with he was based at Amref near Wilson Airport, and they had this flying doctors service. So he was, flying all over East Africa those days, treating different people with medical conditions. So we stayed here as the children of a medical doctor who fled for political reasons, but also fled because of his his job and duty to country. So my father was not a politician at that time. He was much more a person practicing his profession and ostracized and stigmatized and targeted by a dictator because of the service he was doing as a medical doctor. All medical doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, which does not allow them to choose between the patients that are on their sick beds, right? And so dictators do horrible things to people. I think the difference between my father and myself is that at the time of fleeing from Uganda, he was not involved directly in national elective politics. I don't think we had elections in my country at the time. He was a professional. In my case, I have fled just after losing entry into parliament, but gaining a lot of insights into my country's politics.
Okay. So your father was, okay, all right, if I get it, Milton Obote was fighting against the army that was planning to take over. That should be Museveni or not?
No. So we had, Uganda has had a number of presidents, right? Mm-hmm. After Idi Amin Dada was ousted from power during the time of the Civil War, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. The two short-lived presidents thereafter were Godfrey Binaisa, and Lule. And then we had Obote too, right? Mm-hmm. We had a short interim government headed by Paul Muwanga, and then we had Milton Obote. So Milton Obote was our first president, and then we had Idi Amin, and then we had a few months of Binaisa and Lule and Paul Muwanga and Tito Okello Lutua, and then we had Milton Obote taking over, and then we had Yoweri Museveni Kaguta, who has been in power for decades. No wonder people your age don't know any other president apart from Idi Amin and Yoweri Museveni. That is how dismal it is.
All right, I don't know how to take that comment.
I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny.
I think the way you put it is funny. The fact that you're saying that, I mean, some of us don't know that there's ever been another president in Uganda apart from Museveni. Anyway, Reborn MC Chris says, hello guys watching from country 029. Kenya is the best country. It has hosted many refugees who are running away from political and peace instability in their countries. But again, let's continue praying to Kenya, because recently we have seen bad trend of politics which might put our country to political chaos. All right, that's interesting to see. Hilary Kuruita's accent is Kenyan. All right, I don't know. Maybe she's an international citizen, so you never know where she picked the accent. All right, there's a question for you, which I think I'll ask later. All right, about there's a
Did
question.
Somebody say my accent is Kenyan?
Yeah.
But I said I was here from standard 1 up to standard 4. Nilikuwa mkimbizi Kenya, eh? So a lot of what I am, if people are saying Nyanzi is a bad girl, well, you Kenyans contributed to my badness because I studied in Kenya. Mm-hmm.
So we molded you.
Yes, you contributed to what I am. No wonder one of the Kenyans identifies my accent as Kenyan. But it could be anything. My accent could be anything. It could be from anywhere. We watch TV. We imitate people that we love. Mm-hmm. My accent could be from anywhere. At least I think what's important is it's intelligible. People can understand when I speak.
All right. Thank you. All right. I think what we do is, what is the state of, you've actually been, in the center stage of Ugandan politics, and like you rightfully said, is that clearly you have an issue with the president, who you say has been there for decades. I don't understand, what's your journey? What has been your journey like? How did you get into activism? How did you get into politics? And how did you get into ruffling of all these feathers?
Right. So those are 3 questions in one. And maybe I will preface this by addressing the claim you made that I have an issue with the president of Uganda, that I have beef with the president of Uganda. And what I will do is to quickly say that I have only met Yoweri Museveni in life one time. I was undertaking military and political training, which was compulsory for students who had left high school just before we joined university in 1993, when I had completed my high school. And I went to Chankwanzi Military and Political Training School for 3 months. I was so bad at the actual military drills and the physical work, and I was punished all the time, but I was also very eloquent and perhaps the best speaker on behalf of the students. And so I was voted and appointed to address the president when he came to close the training that we had at the end of those 3 months. And so I saw him physically, and I spoke to him to thank him for this training. It was called Muchaka Muchaka at that time that we had. And for 5 minutes of my life, I was shaking through this speech that I gave to him. And all that he said in response to me was why I was wearing purple trousers, purple, the color purple. So I don't know Yoweri Museveni personally. My struggle and contestation against him is against him as a public figure, the person who occupies State House in my country, the person who has abused public resources for over 3 decades, almost 4 decades, the person who has oppressed, repressed, suppressed, and is obsessed with the abuse of human rights of Ugandans. And so I don't have any personal issues with him, but I have a lot of public disgust for Yoweri Museveni as dictator. And he wants to take 5 more years. That is appalling. That is terrible. So how did I enter this journey? Where do I start, Gerald Bitok? Gerald, are you still there?
Yes, Stella, I'm saying you start from the beginning. Every
Where
journey
is the
starts from the
beginning?
How did you get into this? How did you get into
Is
activism?
the beginning the day I was born?
No,
the day
activism,
that I was
into
born
political
a
activism.
little girl. The day that I was born a little girl is the day that my politics began.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That is when you entered
The
into political
day-
activism.
I mean, look, what do people mean when they say, when did you start your political career? I think that for those of us who are born minorities, right, life has been a struggle for day one. I think what you're asking me is, when did I get involved in national elective politics, participating? Because that I can surely tell you was in January. In January of 2020, I was a prisoner serving a sentence at Luzira Maximum Security Prison, Luzira Women's Prison. In February of 2020, that is last year, I was released upon acquittal from serving an 18-month sentence. My sentence was really based on conviction for cyber harassment of Yoweri Museveni through a Facebook post, right? So in January 2020, I was a convicted prisoner. In February 2020, I was an acquitted Ugandan, an ex-convict going back into my country. In March, we had COVID-19 and the lockdown. In April of the same month, I was admitted into hospital 2 times with kidney problems related to toxins I was fed when I was in prison. And so my journey from being a convicted prisoner, getting acquitted, facing lockdown, like our country was locked down in March of last year. And then I had 2 admissions related to failing kidneys, one in a general hospital and secondly in a private specialized hospital. That experience for me pointed to a specific call. During the COVID-19 time, Museveni promised to give us food, posho, which is ugali flour, and beans for every poor, vulnerable individual in the country. And he also promised powdered milk and sugar to lactating and pregnant women. None of this food came to my area, and women were visiting me, a recently released prisoner, and asking for food that was supposed to be catering for my children, right? In that moment of a lot of widespread urban hunger, I called upon a group of women to participate in a protest against the failure and delay of government to deliver these food supplements, this relief package for poor families. I was arrested and beaten up and thrown back into a police cell together with a few comrades. So one lady and 4 men, maybe 3 men with whom we were protesting, out of the others were arrested. And I think that build-up of I have just been released from prison because of writing about the dictator's oppression and repression and suppression in my country, 4 months based again on protesting against his failure, his government's failure to provide food supplements to poor Ugandans. I am back on the floor of a police cell. I've been beaten and brutalized by this very same police that should have been protecting me and maybe arresting the COVID-19 task force. On the floor of the police cells, this particular arrest, I remembered the multitudes of Ugandans who had visited me in prison and said to me, when you are released, Stella, you have to run for parliament. You have to run for a position. And so I thought about all my activism and my academic knowledge production and my different protestations leading up to this moment on the floor in a dirty police cell of Kampala Central Police Station. And I decided I'm going to get involved in the politics of my country simply because I believed, and I still believe, that we needed to become the changes that we were looking for. That is how I got involved into the decision that I had. Yes, to run for office. For a long time, I didn't believe that parliament was the place for me. For a long time, I was one of the greatest critics of the failings of our parliament in Uganda. But when I was on the floor in the police station during COVID-19 lockdown, I decided that if things were going to change, I had to be actively involved. And there was no going back after that. I think for me, that I became a critique of Yoweri Museveni. Perhaps in 2014, when my father, who'd been a medical doctor treating a lot of Ugandans, he'd retired round about that year. He died looking for medicine that was supposed to be provided in our public health facilities. A medical doctor who knows the sort of medical treatment he needs, who has the money to take care of himself and, buy the medicine, had to travel from a health center in our village where he had retired to another health center and then to the main national referral hospital looking for a single vial of medicine, one single vial of medicine. My father would not have died if the budgeting priorities of our government, our parliament, were really focused on the interests of public health and well-being, public welfare. However, that year my father died because there was no money for there was no money in the hospitals for medicine, although there was a lot of money for bullets and tear gas. The year after, 1 year exactly after my father's burial, my mother, coming from the day after my father's service, memorial service, she collapsed. And we spent about 2 hours looking for an ambulance to deliver her from home where she had fallen and take her to a hospital, which was about 10 minutes away from us. I was on the phone with her when she collapsed. She called me, and I spent about 2 hours just trying to locate an ambulance to pick her from the ground where she'd fallen outside our home. And it was friends who drove her in their private car, again to the very same National Referral Hospital in Masaka that my father died from. As she entered, right, she broke down and died. And so the failure of having ambulances or emergency transport in my country meant that my mother was dead. And yet we have so many black mambas and so many enamored vehicles and so many, all sorts of transport. The president's convoy is long, beleaguered with all sorts of vehicles, but we don't have enough ambulances to cater for an entire district to transport elderly women when they collapse. And so my interest in becoming a government critic, which is different to participating actively in national elective politics, follows directly from the deaths, unnecessary deaths, of my father and my mother simply because of budgeting priorities in Uganda. And so I think my entry onto the Ugandan scene as a critique of Yoweri Museveni begins in 2014 and 2015, when I was a child, a little girl, mourning and grieving and thinking my parents should not be in these graves. It's too early for my parents to have died. Had our government been interested, perhaps they wouldn't done, my parents wouldn't have been dead. Had my government been interested in public services, this wouldn't have happened. So 2014, my father dies. 2015, my mother dies. 2016 is the period leading up to the elections, and Makerere University is abusing my labor rights, and I stage a nude protest against the failures of the institution to uphold the Employment Act of my country, the human resource policy of Makerere University, but also I protest against the political interference of Yoweri Museveni's wife, Janet Kataha Museveni, who comes onto the scene because I've been criticizing herself and her husband and the failures of their nepotistic government. And she issues these dictates about my suspension from the university, and she gives these ultimatums later on about me being precluded and excluded from employment as a university academic staff simply because of the critiquer's offering. And so the interference of the First Lady into the independence and autonomy of a university, the oldest public university in the country, compounded or complemented and supplemented my disgust of this regime of Yoweri Museveni. In 2017, we have elections, and I am a vocal critic of the government and vocal supporter of Dr. Kizza Besigye, who was the presidential candidate for Forum for Democratic Change, which is my party. And again, in 2017, like a culmination of my disappointments in the political system of Uganda, the election is stolen, the vote is rigged, and Dr. Kizza Besigye is not sworn into office as he should have. So 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, there are major events in my life that build up into a lot of frustration and anger and disgust and disdain and outrage towards Yoweri Museveni and his dictatorship. And so I become an unemployed and unemployable academic with time on my hands and discontent in my heart and the ability to organize and mobilize. And so I think from 2017 right up to 2018 when I was arrested, I became an active and vocal protester Yeah, so I'm a proud protester, from nude protests at the university to nude protests in the High Court to nude protests. I undertook street protests of all sorts, placard protests, sit-in protests, and more it became less about my own rights and became more about the collective rights of a number of oppressed people. That is sort of my brief journey. In 2018, I'm arrested in November, and I'm arrested a second time because I was arrested in 2017 because of a poem, well, a Facebook post I wrote in Uganda where I referred to Yoweri Museveni as Matako Butako, which is translated as Museveni is just a pair of buttocks. And I think that is the first time that I scandalously entered the political scene as a government critic. I was arrested and charged with cyber harassment and offensive communication against Yoweri Museveni. The Directorate of Public Prosecutions applied for me to be subjected to involuntary mental exam, which I was, my legal team successfully halted by applying to the Constitutional Court to ask for interpretation of an old colonial law, the Mental Treatment Act, which had an article that suggested that for anybody to criticize the colonial government at that time, they must have been mentally ill and they needed to be subjected to involuntary mental examination and then mental treatment. And I thought, Jesus, the colonialists are being reproduced in the Ugandan government. But in this case, I thought that I was empowered by having a group, an amazing pro bono legal team that understood my right as a citizen, not as a colonial subject, to defend my freedom of expression rights. And so for the first time, I took on the regime through constitutional means by applying to the Constitutional Court. So that was 2017. In 2018, November, I was arrested again for another Facebook post, this time a birthday poem, a genuine, honest gift dedicated to Yoweri Museveni, in which I use metaphors of birth and metaphors of a ghost. His mother died years ago, but I use the name Esiteri, a name very familiar to me because my name Stella was betrothed to me. It comes from Esiteri, who's my grandmother. And so when I write about Esiteri, I'm not writing only about Yoweri Museveni, but I'm writing about historical figures that have birthed both myself, Stella Nyanzi, but also Yoweri Museveni, dictator. I'm going to write metaphorically about Esiteri and her vagina and how it produced a monster. A number of people in the prosecution were unable to read beyond the vagina and the pubic hair, and they were obsessed with the genitalia, and they failed to see how these metaphors were making parallels and allusions to abuse of power. So in 2018, I was arrested, charged. I refused to apply for bail, which made it difficult for the courts to release me. I was convicted in 2019. And I was released in 2020, and I just thought I have to run for office. So that is my entry. It's a bit about activism, about my politics being very personal, being inspired by grief about my parents, but also me deciding to take and utilize my privilege and my unemployment, which was created by the regime, to speak truth back to power. And I think that the race for elective politics was an amazing moment of empowerment for me, and it matured my transformation and metamorphosis from an academic, right? The world knew me before as an academic, a highly published scholar with specialization in human sexualities, sexual and reproductive health, and sexual rights, to a protester who was not only known in Uganda, but who became an international figure. And if people say, who's one of Museveni's critics? In the last 5 years, I've been able to build that sort of political career.
All right. So you recently ran again for the Kampala seat. So what happened exactly? Because you're here, then it means something did not go right with your ambitions in running for office. What happened?
I think everything went right. Right? There are a number of objectives that people have when they're running for office, right? In my case, I say it to you that the very same year in which I was nominated by my country's electoral commission, right, is the very same year in which I was a convict at Luzira Women Maximum Security Prison, in which I was a patient at Mengo Hospital, but also Kampala International Hospital, in which we had a lockdown in my country, right? And so for me, 2020, 2021 was an amazing period because within 1 year, I went to school in how to become a politician, how to run a campaign, how to get nominated, how to negotiate for power and political office in my party, Forum for Democratic Change, where I was a nobody, right? There were so many women and men who could have participated in the elections in my political party. There were so many in line ahead of me, but I came from prison to the ballot paper. And so I think that for me, one can look at our inability as a campaign team to enter office. If that was our sole objective, then perhaps we failed dismally. But for me, I mean, of course, there's disappointment that I'm not in parliament. But having spoken with very many mentors, well, I don't have so many, but my few political mentors about what it means to run a campaign and not enter parliament, but stay alive, I realized perhaps it was one of those gifts from the divine that we only realize with hindsight, because I'm not going to be in the, is it 11th or 12th parliament that starts in May 2021 and ends in 2026. I am not going to be occupied by an electorate or constituency that has a lot of demands. I have a lot of time to devote myself to the liberation struggle outside formal parliamentary roles, which are very demanding. And so I think that we ran an amazing campaign. I was poor because all my other competitors had been free and not in prison. They had their liberty outside prison gates to fundraise and raise their social, political, and economic capital before entering the elections. I had none of that. And so we ran a bare-ass campaign, right? My presidential candidate for my party, Honorable President Patrick Oboy Amoriat, whose name is Power in short, he was running a barefoot campaign all over Uganda. In our case, my campaign was running a bare pocket campaign to which contributions were given by people who believed in our cause. And so while a number of people complain and say that women cannot participate effectively in politics without financial capital, in this period of the lockdown, right, I was able to run an effective campaign. A number of contestants withdrew from their election campaign programs and schedules. We were on the road every day that I was healthy. The only times I was not able to participate in programs was when, in solidarity with a number of arrested, actually two, Bobby Wine and Power, presidential candidates were arrested and detained, really for so-called COVID-19 regulations for scientific elections that they broke. But in solidarity with this unfairness, I suspended my campaign for 2 days. Otherwise, the beauty of learning the enormous lesson of how to run a campaign as a woman with nothing really apart from resources such as humans and finances and everything else that was given to me by supporters and colleagues and comrades, and also my political party. That's an amazing lesson. Where does one go to school to do this? I know, Gerald Bitok, that you've been running campaigns and you know how expensive it is to participate, right?
Definitely, I know.
So if you know, think about the value of participating in one of the most contested political campaigns in the whole world, right? And coming out alive. I was arrested 5 times.
During the campaign?
Yes, I was arrested and detained 5 times.
Wow. Incredible.
And, sorry?
I'm saying that's quite interesting. 5 times during a campaign.
Of course. I mean, so people have said to me, Stella Nyanzi, why did you leave Uganda? Why did you desert the struggle? Why leave now yet you run a campaign? Look, anybody who was in Kampala, Uganda for that matter, during the last 1 year knows that I was arrested for protesting against the delayed and failed food delivery. I was arrested for participating in a protest demanding for the justice of a young student at Makerere University, Emmanuel Tegu, who was murdered by the police. They shot at him during so-called curfew hours and he died, right? Curfew related to the COVID-19. And rather than accept their blame, the police in Uganda decided to pathologize Emmanuel Tegu and claim he was mentally sick. But if a person is mentally sick, we don't shoot them to death. And so part of the protest I participated in with a few student leaders was to claim for the justice of Emmanuel Tegu, whose rural-based widowed mother had nobody standing with her. People had decided Emmanuel Tegu was either a thief or a mentally ill person. And so his collateral damage that the police can shoot. And so I was involved in a number of protests, a protest against the locked up shops in Kampala city arcades. During COVID-19, Yoweri Museveni was releasing particular interest groups to him that increased his own pocket, and he forgot socially ostracized informal sector people such as those in arcades. And I protested with traders about the opening of their shops, but also the increasing rent and the failure of government to produce subsidies or even loans to city traders. I participated in another protest. I've forgotten which one, but there were 5 times I was arrested. I was also arrested while I was crossing. I was in Busia town and I was blamed for using Usofia porous border routes during COVID-19 when we supposedly had a national lockdown of borders. And the day that I was arrested, Yoweri Museveni was crossing from Tanzania back into
Uganda.
And I was wondering, how can the president and his convoy, this whole convoy of masked national leaders, fly across national borders and nobody says anything? But I'm a woman with my car parked in Busia and I'm being arrested. And so that again is contestation against what it means to be in a lockdown. And the president is traveling freely to Tanzania, where they were not wearing masks at the time. And President, His Excellency Magufuli was at the height of his challenge and denialism of the reality of COVID-19. And so all my protests and arrests in 2020 leading up to my being on the ballot were really contestations against the abuse of office by Yoweri Museveni.
All right. Now,
I was a nominated political candidate vying for office, Kampala Woman Member of Parliament, and I was arrested 5 times. So when the protection was lifted, by the end of the elections and the results are announced, and I didn't have the protection of being a nominee, imagine how many more times I would have been arrested or abducted had I not left my country. So you said to me that I left. It wasn't leaving because I failed. It was leaving to protect my life because I'm a protester and I'm still protesting quite loudly against all forms of authoritarianism in my country.
All right. There's something you mentioned. You said that the courts were obsessed about the vagina in your case, and you've been accused by your choice of protest or activism, where you've been seen to sexualize your protests much more. And some people have actually accused you of what you've accused the courts of being obsessed with the genitalia. I don't know why you chose that form of activism or protest in terms of protesting against administrative injustices.
But I mean, I can answer your question in two ways. One is, are we seriously going to dismiss all the other forms of protest that I have conducted and just reduce them to...
No, you're not dismissing. There's something. That's because you mentioned about it. I said, okay, let me do that.
Where I write about the vagina. Look, when I protest for food and I protest against femicide and the murders of women in the streets of Uganda, and I protest against the failure to provide money, and drugs in hospital, and I protest against abuse of Makerere University, and I protest against the rotten parliament and the rotten, judicial establishments, the courts and prisons. That is not necessarily related to the vagina. Right?
Sure.
I just want to say that we should not narrow down the entirety of my body. The petitions I've written to different bodies, from the national to the local and all the way to the international. We should not forget that all those are forms of protest. But let me talk about my use of sexuality or genitalia or the buttocks or sex. Topics I love and body parts I am proud to have, because we are not human if we don't have buttocks. Every human being has matako, right? And even animals have matako. I don't know if insects have matako, but I think, first of all, I will say that when an engineer, a mechanic is found working with the wires of a car, we don't say, why are you working with the wires of a car? When a doctor is found cutting up bodies of women to help them deliver babies, we don't say, why are you cutting up that woman? But when I find a journalist cutting up a woman, that's a crime, right? I studied literature, mass communication and literature, as my first degree in Uganda. I was funded by the government of Uganda, a scholarship, right? And so when I write literature, poetry, Facebook posts, when I write graffiti on the walls, when I write a placard, and I'm using amazing language that rhymes and has metaphors, I am practicing my trade as a person who studied poetry, right, and literature, and language, and mass communication. That is why I think I communicate effectively.
Sure.
When I write about sex and sexualities, my PhD and my master's in medical anthropology, I specialized in human sexualities, specifically youth sexualities in the Gambia at the time. As an ethnographer, as an anthropologist, I went to the Gambia where I did my research. A lot of my early work, 1999, perhaps to date, has been producing academic knowledge as a researcher on human sexualities. That is what I do. So I don't understand why people are playing this double standard with me. They expect me to practice my profession. When I use my expertise as a queer scholar, as a feminist, as a person who has a PhD, for crying out loud, and a master's and a bachelor's degree, and a lot of postdoctoral qualifications in human sexualities, I am practicing my trade, my profession, and doing such a good job. A number of people have done PhDs in particular areas, and we never see them utilize their studies. Actually, I'm utilizing my study to speak truth to power in ways that are very effective. So effective that I have offended a man who has an exterior of being impenetrable, right? If mere words can offend Yoweri Museveni, I think we should have a whole platoon, a whole brigade, a whole army of wordsmiths just writing to pull down the dictator. He gets offended. He doesn't get offended by the deaths of mothers who are delivering babies. He doesn't get offended by the corruption that is running rampant in my country. He doesn't get offended by the massive unemployment, but he gets offended by a little poem, 7 stanzas with the word vagina and the word penis and pubic hair. Come on! I think that instead of wondering what we should do, we should bombard him with more poems that use the vagina because it is productive. And so why do I use the language that I do? Why shouldn't I use it? Right? We have seen it is effective, much more effective than policy documents and radio programs and TV presentations and conferences and petitions and perhaps even international lobbying and advocacy. A mere poem posted on Facebook brought the entire judiciary, the DPP, the whole prison and police in my country looking for a woman on her Facebook timeline writing rhythm and rhyme and metaphors. This is powerful. This is powerful. And we need more creatives to use our creative abilities to speak truth to power, because the other language has been domesticated and the sting has been taken out of it. Yoweri Museveni studied literature.
Wow.
Right?
Interesting.
He's a master of literature. They have domesticated polite talk, civil talk. But when a woman says, fuck you, Yoweri Museveni, the whole world stops and says she did not. Yes, she did. We need to be able to speak to a man who has ears but does not hear. We need to be able to color images of our oppression and anguish and suffering with images that he can see, because he pretends not to see our suffering in Uganda every day. And if language is going to give me a tool that undoes his power in ways he cannot shoot a poem, can he?
I doubt.
He cannot shoot a poem.
But he can show the person doing the poem.
Well, I'm still alive. That is why I'm in exile. And I'm writing more poems.
On vagina again? And buttocks?
Writing poems that are effective. Look, there are so many other metaphors that one can use. I think my most effective writing, my most affective, it affects the emotions, either to elicit disgust or rage or this woman must be crazy, are when I have crafted beautiful verses or a single post that has touched people. It's when I use that language, it's very effective, very, very effective. I suppose because of the pretense that women don't have sex and therefore they can't talk about sex, the pretense that if you're holy and moral, you don't touch your buttocks and you don't wash your genitals. We do these things all the time. It's good routine. It's good practice for us to do these things. The worst nightmare is when I wrote about sanitary pads. She did not use sanitary pads. Of course she used sanitary pads, and it was very effective. And I think that for me, that we need to find fresh and innovative, non-violent means of combat. And look, my writing has been effective. If people don't do it, it's okay. I have chosen to do it. I think I have been effective, not just in Uganda, my brother, but to the entire world. If morality is not serving us, let us be immoral to get away with the most immoral dictator. If respectability and the language of politeness are not serving us, let us be disrespectful and impolite. After we have ousted the dictator, we shall go back to singing Bible verses and speaking hallelujah to each other. But I think that the moment for me does not call for this piousness, or we would pretend to be so pious and so clean in our mouths, right? I think I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I contribute to the struggle. And if it means I'm writing in immoral or so-called immoral intonations, so be it. Polite talk is not, it doesn't do anything to Yoweri Museveni, but in your own words, by your own admission, I have ruffled his feathers. I have, to use his own, metaphor. He said that those of us who dare him are as foolish as those who poke the leopard's anus. And look, my poetry, my verses, my impolite talk pokes his anus, leopard's anus, every time I write. And I celebrate that. It's funny.
All right, now talking about poems and protests and struggles, your comrade Bobby Wine seems to be the latest victims of your poems and your word overtures and all that. Why the fallout with Bobby Wine?
So I think again, I want us to recognize the fact that using mere poetry, I was able to speak truth to a man I admire. I admire Bobby Wine, Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu's leadership in the liberation struggle. Admiring him does not mean that I don't find issue or take issue with some of his methods or some of his practices, right? And I think that part of the problem about having a monster dictator in the shape of Yoweri Museveni was because as Ugandans, we forbade ourselves to criticize and scrutinize and analyze him, right? He was raised so high as a liberator, freedom fighter, blue-eyed boy of the West, that none of us could touch him, criticize, or point out his weaknesses. And he grew into an untouchable demigod. When I see a replica of this person who doesn't want to be accountable to his followers, to those he's leading, to his supporters and allies, when I see a replica of that in the opposition, as an adult who's aged 46 years, I am appalled that Ugandans and other allies of the Ugandan liberation struggle think we should not criticize, scrutinize, analyze, even judge and find wanting one of the leaders in the liberation struggle. If we are saying that part of Yoweri Museveni's problem is his failure to account to Ugandans and be accountable to us, why do we want to reproduce the very same authoritarianism in the opposition? Why? And so I think that for me, again, people say Bobby Wine and yourself are supposed to be fighting on the same side. Of course we are. We are fighting against oppression. A snake is a snake in your house, Gerald Bitok, or in the house of Yoweri Museveni. A dangerous poisonous snake, wherever we find it, we don't cuddle it. We say you're a poisonous snake, and we do to the poisonous snake what must be done to it, maybe to call the animal rescue services. But in many cases, I think that people get a beating implement and beat the snake out of the house, right? So why should we groom baby snakes in the opposition? Why? The first time that I took issue with Bobby Wine was when National Unity Platform, NUP, his political party, was created. And all of us who subscribed to the People Powers movement, because I'm a strong believer in the People Powers movement, were ordered by Bobby Wine to defect from our own political parties and join the National Unity Platform. People Power movement was a movement that welcomed all of us interested in the liberation struggle for Uganda to join, regardless of our parties. It was not important to desert, defect, leave our parties in order to belong to People Power as a movement. And I think that Bobby Wine, his most endearing moment is when he's trying to mobilize unity and allied interests of all of us in the liberation struggle, fighting against dictator Yoweri Museveni. And it was not important if we belonged to different political parties. The moment he introduced National Unity Platform, a woman such as myself, who was a member of Forum for Democratic Change as my political party, who was built up in terms of the sort of defiance politics that I do by my political party, FDC, was being put between a rock and a hard place. either join NUP or don't be part of the people's movement. And I thought it's not possible. And none of the Ugandans were able to critically speak truth back to National Unity Platform as well as Bobby Wine and say, what is happening? What is happening to the people's movement, right? That was the first time that Ugandans and our allies were horrified that I was questioning Bobby Wine about this new exclusive, he's excluding us, alienating politics, right? The second time I criticized Bobby Wine is when, in a moment of asking for dictator Yoweri Museveni's education qualifications to become president, but also in a moment of the country laughing loud at dictator Janet Kataha Museveni's lack of qualifications to get a degree at Makerere University because she never completed her high school or even her O-levels. In the moment of discussing education qualifications, yet Janet Museveni has been posturing as the Minister of Education in my country without having an education qualification. In the moment of discussing education qualifications, the question of Bobby Wine's own education took center stage. The question of his actual date of birth became an issue because people were saying, when was Yoweri Museveni born? You remember that the presidential age limits were removed from my country's constitution when Yoweri Museveni brutalized parliamentarians by sending army special forces command men into parliament during the discussion of Article 102B, which provided for presidential age limits. So questions about Bobby Wine's age and the issue that there was inconsistency and contradiction between his public dates of birth, but also there were questions about his academic performance and qualifications. I thought that it was an important moment for Bobby Wine to highlight his accountability and transparency to those of us who believe in him as a leader, because I do believe in Bobby Wine's leadership qualities. He has been able to galvanize and mobilize urban masses and youth, but also he has brought back the interest of a number of people who were previously uninterested in Uganda's politics. So he's a good leader. He's doing a lot of work for the liberation struggle. And I think that for such a person, accountability and transparency are important. And so his failure to immediately respond to questions about his education and his age, I thought for me, we can't allow this moment to go. And so I criticized and wrote and questioned what happened. Look, if a leader failed to the point of getting F9 mathematics, I'm an educator, I'm also a parent, and I have children who have varying academic abilities. I don't think that failing to pass mathematics is so much a problem as failing to own up to the failure, right? Own up to the failure, but I think it's important to show, although I failed math, I'm a very good musician, or I'm a very good leader, or I'm a very good orator. And later on, Bobby Wine did this. But I think that for me, that was the second moment when the public was shocked that I was able to criticize Bobby Wine. Nobody touches Bobby Wine. The third time, I think, I mean, there have been a few other incidences when I openly criticized him. This last post-election moment for me was important to raise questions about how we are organizing the post-election liberation struggle in Uganda, right? I think that those of us who have been calling for unity between the main opposition players in terms of political parties must take seriously some of the challenges to this unity. And I think that some of the reasons why unity is going to be difficult is if all our different political party leaders are beyond scrutiny, beyond accountability, beyond transparency, we cannot unite, right? And so part of what I was doing with my poems that are structured and targeting perhaps the person, the practice, and the politics of Bobi Wine is to call us to be self-reflexive, is to call back the liberation struggle freedom fighters in Uganda to look inward and identify the venomous snakes within us and maybe defang, remove the fangs from the snakes, and be critical and self-analytical. Why are we going back to this bourgeois type of opulence in a time when we are very poor? Why show off one's bulletproof car when a number of Ugandans are getting murdered without bulletproof protection, but also we don't have ambulances still? Why throw a lavish birthday party when comrades in his party, in his inner circle, are still detained in military, facilities? And it's important to raise these questions. It's important to raise them. I think that by raising the questions, I'm not writing off Bobi Wine. I'm just inviting us to be critical of what we're doing, because we need to reorganize the liberation struggle in Uganda.
Right. And on your criticism on because I saw you also jaded him for his for purchasing or actually getting a bulletproof car, and you've actually mentioned it again.
According to what he says, it was a donation from diaspora.
Right. People have also argued that you mentioned that you've gone into exile to stay alive. What's the difference between you being out of the country to stay alive and Bobi Wine trying to stay alive in Uganda? Because as well, you're part of the struggle in Uganda, and there are comrades as well that you've left in Uganda who are still being mutilated and bludgeoned by government. What's the difference between these two scenarios? Between you running into exile to stay safe and Bobi Wine being behind a bulletproof car?
Right. So first of all, I have not said to anybody, Stella, don't criticize my being in exile. I think what I do is actually invite question. If I did not want people to question me about being in exile right now, I would not have publicized it. The first thing I did, perhaps even going against my protection support team, was to work with a lawyer who said to me, let us publicize your being in Kenya as in exile, right? Because that too is a form of offering you protection. And so I have not stopped anybody from asking questions about my exile or even the role of exile in the liberation struggle. I think it's an important conversation for us to have, right? Yeah. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is that it is foolish or foolhardy to draw parallels between my exile and the purchase of a bulletproof car. I don't see how the comparison or parallels can be drawn. But let me talk a bit about exile, because I think for me that it's important for people to recognize that a dead soldier cannot fight, right? A lot of our abducted comrades who are in detention facilities, we still do not know. Those who have been abducted, tortured during interrogation, and buried in unmarked graves we shall never identify, can no longer contribute to the struggle. I said to you, I was arrested 5 times in 2020. If you take away the period of 2 months when I was in prison, we are left with 10 months. In a period of 10 months, 10 months of lockdown, I was arrested 5 times, right? We have abductions going on in Uganda today. When my partner, my lover, the man that I love, a member of NUP, was abducted shortly after the elections, I remembered that just before the elections, one of my campaign managers, the man who in fact nominated me to my party, seconded my nomination to my party as flag bearer, was also abducted and tortured. Although he's not from NUP, he's from FDC, my party. And he was beaten up and later abandoned in a national hospital, Rubaga National Hospital, with a brutalized body. In a period of less than a month, my campaign manager and then my lover were both abducted, tortured, one thrown into a hospital. My lover was thrown into a police and later released on police bond, right? After interrogation about plan B, I knew that I would be the next in line for abduction. Now, I want to tell your audience that in 2017, I was abducted by 8 men, some of who were wearing masks before Corona was introduced into the world, who are carrying pistols and forced into a car and driven around Kampala town, okay, Kampala city, almost the entire night, right? I was abducted before. I don't want to be abducted again. I know what it means to be a single mother with children and be away in prison, in police cells, in detention facilities. And I think that for me, having lost entry into parliament, having lost the protection and immunity that the political campaign season offered, having suffered abduction, my own in 2017, my campaign manager in January 2021, and my lover in 2021, I knew that abduction was knocking at my door again. And so I left. I have no regrets for leaving Uganda. I have no regrets for deciding to stay alive. Yoweri Museveni is murdering his opponents, his critics. I'm not about to join his eating squad. I'm not about to convert from the liberation struggle. It is dangerous right now. It was dangerous for me to be in Uganda. And so I left to stay alive, to fight again. If Bobby Wine feels that having a bulletproof vest just for himself, right, is the best choice, a leader in Uganda, leading a group of people, his security have been shot at with bullets and rubber bullets. I mean, my lover had to replace his security team, and when they were traveling, he was shot with a rubber bullet just behind his ear. And so the dangers are many and manifold, but is wearing his sole bulletproof vest the most exemplary mode of leadership and protection and security that we can come up with as the opposition? I don't think so. But inviting people to discuss selfishness and self-centeredness and egotism or egoism, right?
It's something
inviting people. We have to have the discussions.
All right. And the question is, don't you think Bobby Wine would have the same argument? You've argued that you've been abducted before, you've been jailed before, you've been arrested before illegally. And the truth is, Bobby Wine has been shot at as well illegally. He has been attacked and all that. If you argue that you're protecting your life by going into exile to save yourself from those things, don't you think Bobby Wine would have the same argument that I've been shot at, I have been attacked before by government? You've rightfully admitted that you've seen him being shot at and all that. Bobby Wine has gotten a bulletproof car.
I haven't seen him. I've seen members of his team being shot
Okay.
at.
All right. So then clearly he has been shot because one of the bodyguards was actually killed as well. The same arguments that you're making, that you're running away from the injustice that have been put on you over time, arrests, arrests and detention, all the other things, and abuse that you feared would come, especially after you losing immunity of an aspirant. Don't you think, because you also came to Kenya, you didn't come with Ugandans that you were part of your comradeship, would you argue that then that Bobby Wine would have the same argument? Why do you have a problem with that argument if Bobby Wine made it the same way?
And so I think that my poems are inviting us to have this conversation. My poems are telling us, Ugandans, let us have an honest conversation about what we're doing as a liberation struggle. And while a number of people may find discomfort in what I did or what I have done, and they have accused me of pointing guns at supposedly one of my own, I think that it is important to have these discussions about, look, when Dr. Kizza Besigye was leading the walk to work protests, right? He endured similar, let's call them similar, perhaps different, but similar challenges But as the people's president, we saw him walking with his shoes. He left behind his car, his four-wheel drive car, and he walked with the people without a bulletproof vest. Not to suggest that Kizza Besigye was better, but he had a heart for the people, and there is nothing wrong with me inviting Bobi Wine to have a heart for the masses of Ugandans, such as myself, who believe in his leadership role, right? When I write about his bourgeois house and talk about, that's another poem,
Yeah.
which really infuriated and angered Ugandans. Talk about people in small one-roof houses and people staying in shanty shelters and tin houses and cardboard houses. I'm inviting us to have a conversation about class and class separation and the liberation struggle. There are people struggling with rent, right? There are people struggling with food and also, police bond and God knows what else, burial fees, and hospital fees and all this in the liberation struggle. And I think that because Bobi Wine is a public figure, I'm inviting us to use him as a symbol to criticize ourselves quite reflexively about what we're doing in the liberation struggle in Uganda. It is this lack of reflexivity and self-analysis that has put us where we are, right? And as an academic, remember that my biggest contribution to the struggle is really in the realm of ideas, mainly in the realm of ideas, mainly as a thinker, because I'm a scholar, I'm an academic at the end of the day. Unless we invite deeper analysis of what we're doing as a liberation struggle, I think we shall not go very far. And so, again, I have no regrets for writing the poems that I write. I know that the people who hate me for a particular poem today will love me if I write a poem that celebrates our strengths. But I cannot just be a praise singer. If we want praise singers, let's go to make up some shrines for ourselves and get worshippers to worship us. I'm not inviting new Jesuses into the liberation struggle. I'm inviting human beings who are leaders, who are open to scrutiny and accountability and are flexible to change with the demands of the time. If criticism is not welcome in the liberation movement, we shall not go far, right? And I'm happy to be the scapegoat that takes the, I think part of the problem is because it's me, a woman, doing what I'm doing. Women are not supposed to ask questions, they're not supposed to be heard, they're not supposed to challenge, they're not even supposed to have money and connections to take them to exile. And so part of the scandal is about men feeling challenged, right? I don't think that any of the things I have written about in my poetry about Bobi Wine or Kizza Besigye before, or even Yoweri Museveni, are not whispered by men and strong women in corridors, dark corridors of power. None of the things I talk about come from the air, right? And so people have said I'm mentally ill, I am a psychopath, I have been compromised by Yoweri Museveni, I am suffering grief of the loss of the election, etc., etc. And perhaps I'm all those things. Perhaps I'm a witch. I have been accused of being a witch. But I think that for me, I am playing my duty as a writer, as a poetess, as a critique, as an academic, as a thinker. There's nothing wrong with thinking, and there's nothing wrong with thinking contrary to the masses. After all, I have the privilege of being able to use tools such as poetry, which many people consume, but they cannot produce. So I'll keep producing the poems. I think it's doing effective work. Just even inviting you to talk about, I mean, you're a Kenyan journalist who uses Facebook, and you're discussing Bobi Wine, and not just phrases, but you are questioning and raising some of the questions that I've raised. This is important work. It has to be done. And I'm happy to do it. It's a thankless job, but eventually people think, that is what you are doing. Now I am with you.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the struggle. You've mentioned quite repeatedly, you've talked about Kizza Besigye. I don't know if I've pronounced the name right. I think there are people like the way you pronounce Uganda and Kizza Besigye. And Bobby Wine and you as well, Stella Nyanzi, who have been the faces of the struggle in Uganda against government overtures and, and misdeeds and all other things that we could mention. Why at a point where you guys have an opportunity to look at one direction and fight the person you've always had a problem with or a system that you have a problem with, you guys are turning the guns on each other. You guys can never fight on one front and actually kick out the government, the system that you're talking about. Why should you fight within when you can fight on one side? What's the problem? What's the challenge?
Fighting with again?
I'm asking, all right, it has been argued that there's Kizza Besigye, there's Stella Nyanzi, there's Bobby Wine, who have been the faces of the struggle in Uganda. And the fact is, and the truth is that you guys seem to be having a problem with each other as comrades in a revolution. Can't you fight alongside each other instead of against each other? What's stopping you guys from working together and kicking out Museveni?
Right. So one thing I want to say is that there are many faces of the struggle in Uganda, right?
Yeah.
I may be the Facebook face. There are Twitter faces. There are street faces. There are rural and urban faces, and that there are very many other faces of the struggle. If you mean vocal or representatives, public figures who have identified with the struggle, there are very, very many others apart from Kizza Besigye and Bobby Wine. And I think I am quite flattered by yourself to be named besides these two men. Men I admire immensely. Men I look up to immensely. That's the first thing I wanted to just preface to my answer, my response to you. Dr. Kizza Besigye is my mentor. I mention him many times because he is my mentor, and more, a lot of his cautions and warnings and lessons to us Ugandans they are profound because they have been proved true. In the last election season, in this particular election season, Yoweri Museveni, when they were in the Bush struggle, Dr. Kizza Besigye was his medical doctor, and so perhaps he knows him much better than a lot of us who joined the struggle much later. And so a lot of what he said was found problematic by the younger liberation struggleists who are led predominantly by Bobby Wine. A number of people left the movement that Dr. Kizza Besigye had led prior to the rise of Bobby Wine. And many people left FDC and the Defiance movement and joined People Power movement and joined NUP later on, which is led by Robert Chagulanyi, Bobby Wine. I think for me, that I've been one of the people, because I'm FDC and I'm People Power. I'm a member of People Power, although I refuse to join National Unity Platform. I am one of the people who has been berated, insulted, condemned by Ugandans because I called for unity of the opposition way before, I think must have been June of 2020. I totally believe that the question of reclaiming our power, our dignity, our rights, our constitution, our public pass from dictator Yoweri Museveni is not a one-man show, it's not a one-party show, it's not a one-region show. It's going to take a concerted effort from all of us. One of the problems we have is that, elective democracy, multi-party democracy demands that we stay fragmented in our different political parties. Political parties are important. I contested in the politics of my country through FDC, which is a political party. Some people claim that I lost the election because I chose to stay in the FDC and I did not join the NUP. So political parties have made me, and maybe they have put my current political career where it is. They are important. In the post-election moment, when a lot of severe lessons have been learned by those of us who should be learning lessons from the experience of running against Yoweri Museveni, running against members of the opposition, running against each other, the most important lesson for me is now that the elections are over, they've been rigged, and Yoweri Museveni is going to swear himself into office, whether we like it or not. Unless we work quickly to reorganize ourselves and our strategies and to unite, there is no way we are going to be able to be effective against a militant, violent dictator. I totally believe in the need for unity. We need to draw from the wisdom and experience of Dr. Chiza Besigye. We need to draw from the youthfulness and vigor and energy and perhaps naivety of Bobby Wine. We need to bring on the military generals, Mugisha Muntu and the others from the opposition, guys who run against Yoweri Museveni. We need to bring on board the older political parties, Democratic Party and Uganda People's Congress. We need to unite beyond our political party factions and also include corporate society and civil society and the public media. We need to unite in Uganda. Disunity right now is created because I think that that's what elections do. They force us to work in multi-parties, which mean we cannot unite, which mean we have to work away from each other and work against each other and compete ourselves against and amongst ourselves. The competition is over. We were beaten hands down by a dictator, not because he won the election, but because he has systemically enshrined the rigging of elections, right? Through a number of mechanisms we can talk about one day. And so unity is important. My role as a woman, one of my most important roles in this post-election moment is to keep calling for unity, because I know that I have a voice that can be taken seriously. Maybe they will not take the content seriously, but they will listen to me because I'm just a woman. I'm just a woman making noise. What is she saying this time? And so I keep calling for unity. Your question about why it has been difficult to unite is an important question. Until we are able to analyze the stumbling blocks in our liberation struggle in Uganda, that which is stopping us from uniting, until we are able to name those problems among ourselves as the opposition, we cannot come together. So I totally believe in unity. I also think that unity does not mean agreement, right? I don't think that unity is necessarily comfortable. I don't think it's easy. And I think it's going to be negotiated and we have to navigate the process. But if we all decide we are going to work together and come together, perhaps about a cause, perhaps in particular actions, but we are all mobilized and conscientized and educated and sensitized about the need to work together on particular issues, in particular fashions, and we're given a program, unity is possible.
I think you guys should unite and try and form a united front. But otherwise, I don't think. I think the only person.
I agree with you.
Yeah, that's the only person.
I agree with you.
All right. So if you don't unite, I can tell you that the only person who can deal with Museveni then would be God, but not opposition, because clearly as well.
God still works. Matters of life and death. Matters of life and death are sometimes left in the hands of God. But I think that for me, I would like to invite Ugandans not to just leave the matter with God alone, because we can't wait for death to take Yoweri Museveni away. I think it will be very good for history to be written, and Ugandans are written down as having worked with the hand of God to oust a dictator and to show him during his lifetime what a post-Museveni Uganda would be like.
All right, and I'll be waiting to see that. I'll be waiting to see how the opposition is going to unite. The comrades in revolutions are going to unite in Uganda and try to fix that what you have had a problem with in Ugandan leadership. Others without the unity, trust me or trust us or trust me and you, the struggle will be in vain. Now, with all the years of the struggle and decades of abductions and deaths and shootings and government extras and all that, what would you say are the gains that you've made as Ugandans in the struggle, the political struggle?
A lot of gains. There have been a lot of gains. In a moment of arrogant insanity, Yoweri Museveni threatened and claimed that in 2020 there will be no opposition in Uganda. He will have crushed our entirety. One of my celebrations, which many people do not agree with, is that in 2021, January 14th, we had viable, strong opposition parties that produced presidential candidates to contest against Yoweri Museveni, right? So our historical parties, but also new parties that were formed after he declared there will be no opposition in Uganda. So there's the Alliance for National Transformation, ANT, and the National Unity Platform, NUP, are two relatively newer parties that joined the struggle against the presidency of Yoweri Museveni. And we also had a number of independent candidates who joined the presidential race. And so one of the first celebrations is that in spite of the danger, the real danger to the lives of Ugandans who dare challenge, contest, run against Yoweri Museveni's entrenchment into power, indeed we have a strong caliber of leaders, men, and in the case of the presidential election, just one woman, who were able to challenge Yoweri Museveni, right? And so the opposition is not dead. We're not going anywhere. We are still alive, and we're still quite a strong force to reckon with. If the playing field had been free and fair, perhaps Yoweri Museveni would have been ousted by this contestation of political parties. But the playing field is not free and fair. So that's the first celebration. I celebrate that we have a viable opposition. Part of the gains have been our ability to expose and change the narrative around Yoweri Museveni as a liberator, a freedom fighter, a person who works for the people. He is now known to be public enemy number one because of the sort of exposés and expositions that a number of us in the liberation struggle have been able to do. When a person is arrested using a constitutional means, the police is involved, the person is charged, investigations are made, and they're arraigned before a court within 48 hours, and if they need to be remanded to a prison while investigations and the trial proceeds, they are taken to a prison facility and their location is known, right? The existence of abductions that are illegal, irregular, and totally unconstitutional is an exposure of how the military regime is using state institutions of the army and the police and the prisons and other paramilitary, extra-military, I don't know if they're extra-constitutional, military outfits to abduct Ugandans simply because they dare express views that are contrary to praise singing of Yoweri Museveni. Exposing that dictator Museveni is using our state institutions to do this, is using our armed personnel and armed officers of Uganda to do his dirty work and beat down the opposition must be celebrated. I mean, how does one provide evidence against a dictator? And I think that the opposition has been able to do it. exposing the repression that exists, right? The shutting down of the internet, I think for me, he wouldn't have shut down the internet and shut down and suspended the licenses of foreign correspondents and required public media personnel to register again if we were not a viable opposition offering alternative narratives. But the fact that he had to go to the limit and extent of shutting down the internet means that he was trying to shut down our alternative narratives and rhetoric and discourse that would have shown him up for the dictator and oppressor that he is. And so shutting down the civil society, how do we show that he's actually shutting it down and repressing it if not through the work and contestations of the opposition? And so have there been gains? There have been some. We have been able to lobby the international community, the regional and African and even East African neighbors are now in the know of the failures of government and governance in our country. Is it good enough? Perhaps it's not. I have heard people say that the opposition in Uganda is not as strong as the opposition elsewhere, perhaps in Kenya. When we choose non-violent means...
We actually don't have an opposition here. You're lucky. You guys are better off. Our opposition is in government. There's something called the handshake in Kenya.
I will not allow myself to be dragged into comments onto the Kenyan political scene right now. I'm seeking refuge here.
You don't want to poke the leopards down here.
I don't know if the leopards here have anases. I don't even know if you have leopards here.
I bet they do. Anyway.
And so I think that a number of people have said to me, Stella, maybe you should rent or hire some Jaluos and take them to Uganda. It's a very ethnic sort of conversation about who can protest the most. Okay, I've had some people offering me Gikuyu. Okay, go to the Kikuyu or go to the Jaluo. They are very good at doing these things. But like I said before, I am not going to fall for the temptation of entering the politics of a country where I am seeking. Yes, I am an asylum seeker here, and I will not go into that conversation. But the opposition in Uganda, people can diss us, people can dismiss us. I think we've done a very, 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 very good work. And what we need to now do is reorganize ourselves, because most definitely Yoweri Museveni has vulgarized our judiciary, our parliament, our military and police, our armed forces, and our public media to ensure that he gets reinstated into power for the next 5 years. And it's up to us to offer the challenge that we must. I believe he can be ousted from power using non-violent means even before 2026, when the next elections are due.
All right. As we roll up to almost reaching our tail end, I want to read some comments here. I'm seeing Oyo Teresa Evans says, secondly, how does she intend to approach LGBT issues in a country of asylum, Kenya, which has outlawed homosexuality? Douglas Nyakamongoro, watching from Kawa, wish we had a woman like that in Kenya. The Kenyan women people purport to be leaders are either corrupt by their way into power through being led by the iron mighty, fearful name it. All right, interesting. Shamira Mesa, of course, they're in Uganda, taking the critical section. Right. Oyotere Evans, please let me understand what is the interview's position about LGBTI issues and as they are today in Uganda. I don't know if you can answer that.
Right. So like I say to you, my specialization is human sexualities. I have done a number of research projects while I was still at Makerere University with the vibrant LGBTIQ community in Uganda. And I think that a lot of my animation and passion to protest draws from lessons that I learned from the urban refugee community, LGBTI communities in Uganda. And so as a queer scholar and a queer activist because I locate myself centrally as a person who believes that LGBTIQ citizens deserve all the human rights and constitutional protections that the country provides. I am an LGBTIQ activist and scholar. I have participated in gay pride. I have participated in a number of civil actions to contest against the anti-homosexuality bill and the anti-homosexuality act. And I align myself strongly with the LGBTIQ community in Uganda. Part of the reasons that are given for my performance in the last elections in Uganda are because of my public stance on the human rights and the need to protect the human rights of sexual and gender minorities in my country. And a number of people who believe in conservative culture and religion think that I should not have vocalized this. But one of my nominees in the national for the national elections was a transgender man. I'm proud to have associated myself with him. He walked with me to the Electoral Commission. I was nominated under the glaring lenses of cameras, and he was there in his transgender self. Registered him. He used to have a female name before, and he now goes by his masculine name because he has transitioned as a transgender man. And he nominated me into the national elections of my country. And so I had strong support from the community, even in my politics. And so the question is, what is my stance on LGBTIQ people in Uganda? It is consistent. They are human beings. They are Ugandan citizens. They are protected by the constitution of my country. They are marginalized by a largely homophobic legislature or parliament, which does not understand that God creates us the way that he creates us. And God is not sorry that he created homosexuals as homosexuals and he created heterosexuals as heterosexuals. I'm a heterosexual mother. I'm a cisgender person. It does not stop me from allying with a highly marginalized, ostracized, penalized, and criminalized population of Ugandans who have done nothing wrong apart from be themselves. Currently, the opposition in Uganda is undergoing a lot of marginalization, brutalization by the state. And I ally myself and position myself strongly with the opposition. There is no crime with that. Likewise, there is no crime with me allying myself strongly with the LGBTIQ community in Uganda. I know that one day Uganda will be progressive and we shall remove any form of legislation that criminalizes love between adults above 18 years of age. And I hope that one day it will be safe for Ugandans of alternative sexual orientations and gender identities to be citizens in my country and to be protected. I think that if we don't protect sexual minorities, LGBTIQ people, we risk losing a lot of the public health gains, the human rights gains we have made as a country.
All right. I also think Adibo Dan Dipsy saying there's no difference between Bobby Wine's bulletproof vest car and Dr. Stella Nyanzi is going to exile. The argument isn't strong enough. But I am glad she's open to honest conversations, even if it means questioning our own actions and decisions. And I think that's actually what is profound for me. The fact that you're also open for criticism. Julius Rockefeller says Stella Nyanzi may be state-funded at this moment, looking at all that she is doing, insulting Bobby Wine, who is fighting for freedom. All right. Joella Emanyana K from Motella is demonstrating the division in opposition will ever keep the tyrants in power. Julius Rockefeller is just great. That's all. Talking about the lack of unity within opposition. Cheria Tol Kipkema says he's a literature guru, to say the least. Great following conversation. Thank you so much. Lubenga says you want to Bobby Wine to have art, yet you took off. Come on, Stella Nyanzi. Usema rudi nyumbani, tuje tumaliza nyumbani. Come on, we finished this. And all right, keep text is making sense. Stella Nyanzi recognized Bobby. You just desperately want a discussion with him. All right. Okay. Jamil Hamad says she left us to die. Jeroborio Liki Sarah Jabri says, I love how you pronounce Uganda. Viva Stella, the struggle continues. All right. Frank Senior Jr. says, Stella Nyanzi is always open-minded. Wilfred is watching us from Kapsabet. All right. I want to ask you 3 questions that might actually almost seem to be a strain on its own as we to our tail end. Ask you as a human politician. And we celebrated, a couple of weeks ago we celebrated the Women's Day or the Women's Week. And we've been discussing about the gains and the journeys of African women and also generally women in the world, where they have suffered, the discrimination they have suffered over time, their interest in politics, the progress that we made in terms of empowering women, taking them to school and giving them a space at the table to have a discussion. And I would want to know, having being actively a woman who has been involved in the issues of national discourse, been involved in politics and all that, what did you say are the things that women go through, the challenges that women go through? That is first. Now, the second is women complain about leadership, political leadership in countries. And yet, the data and research have shown that women form the biggest chunk of voters in any country. What is stopping women? What is stopping women from electing people like Stella Nyanzi to champion for their rights? And again, lastly, the third question is, what are the gains that we've made in terms of seeking an equal space for women? Stella?
Right. So we have 5 minutes.
Yeah. I'll make it 7.
And we have 3 questions, but also I want to...
All right. Use as much minutes as you want, maybe within 10 minutes.
I think I want to celebrate the comments from your audience. They're very generous. They haven't insulted me this time, or maybe you have just chosen out.
No. I've actually read all the comments. I think I've read all the comments.
They're very sweet. So I want to thank your audience, at least for walking the journey of our 2 hours with me. And for those who saw some sense in what I said, I appreciate that. I just want to talk about the one comment about Stella Nyanzi is state-funded and she is she's been compromised by Yoweri Museveni's regime. If anybody has been listening and they still think like that, I think what I say to them is to reiterate my 2017 poem post that got me into trouble, Museveni Matako Mutako. I'm very, I'm glad and delighted to say that on the taco, right? So on Gerald
Matako the taco on the taco.
And I'm on Gerald Bitoko's program. On Gerald, on the program.
How you want to baptize me, Stella?
No, it's Ugandans who say this. So let me do a little poem as I go into the women question. On the program The Tackle, presented by Gerald Bitoko, I want to reiterate my initial post that Yoweri Museveni Mutako Matako or Matako Mutako. So the question about women and the challenges we face.
Let me steal your seconds a bit. I'm saying there's a comment. I want you to tell me what this comment means in your Baganda. Says that is from Omuwalu Wabobi. Says emotoka yarona abantu ne birthday party hii kwebusa magesi gwe bewari ongenda okenya wagenda nani. What does that mean?
So the first part is emotoka yaruma abantu, and that is the car. So I think the bulletproof car, heart or pained people. Look. So whoever Muwalawa Bobby means Bobby's daughter or Bobby's girl. I had to make a point about Bobby Wine being as infallible as any other leader, right? I could not give up the moment, the opportune moment of utilizing the vanity of his bulletproof car to make my statement. I could have talked about the beating up of women in the National Unity Platform. I could have talked about the use of sex in exchange for flag membership or party cards in the National Unity Platform. I could have talked about the lack of financial capital financial capital accountability to donors and other local contributors and fundraisers in the National Unity Platform. I could have talked about a whole range of selectivism and preferential treatment and sectarianism within the National Unity Platform. I did not write about any of the dirt that I have heard about and seen in National Unity Platform. I wrote about the bulletproof car. If people think that I want to injure the reputation of Bobi Wine on National Unity Platform, they are mistaken. If I want to injure and damage National Unity Platform, I have a lot of grievances I have heard and witnessed and observed. But I chose to write about a bulletproof vest and a bulletproof car, right? There are so many ways of eliciting a conversation that demands for accountability and transparency in our different opposition formations. I chose the easiest.
So it could have been worse.
It could have been, yeah, because I have the ammunition to do that. And like I said, I have the ammunition to write dangerous poems. So people in National Unity Platform, do not dare me.
They need to be grateful.
If I want to damage National Unity Platform, I can. If I want to injure Bobi Wine, I can. But that is not my objective. I'm not a malicious person. I'm an ally saying, let us be self-critical.
Okay. All right.
I lose nothing because right now I'm in Kenya. Right? I'm in Kenya. I can give up on the struggle.
That sounds safe. Sounds very safe.
Keep poking my nose. Keep poking my nose in the affairs of the opposition in Uganda. So about the women question, I'm a woman. I participated in the elections. I did not go to parliament, but I learned so many things. I won so many hearts and minds. The challenges are very many for women such as myself to participate in elections, particularly if we're not participating in the regime party, if we're participating in the opposition party. Perhaps what you shall do, Gerald Bitok, is to invite me another day to talk about the challenges and opportunities that women are facing, because it will be totally, it will be a disservice to women in the political
That's what I realize, actually. We'll be doing it an injustice if we say we are going to discuss it within 5 minutes.
Yeah, so let me not disrespect other women in the political terrain by just saying I appreciate the time, and I thank you very much, and I thank your audience for giving me the platform. I enjoyed myself. Where I have caused offense, well, bear with me. I am a woman in exile trying to make meaning of a country that is run by a dictator. Thank you very much, Gerald Bitok, and thank you to your audience for the tackle. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
All right, somebody's asking, who is this lover you told us about?
Oh, he's a guy I love and admire, and politics. So when you bring it back to talk about the challenges of women in politics, I can talk about the highs and lows of my relationship with a man in the National Unity Platform while I'm in the FDC. He's an amazing, amazing gentleman, and I send him my love, and I hope he's fine. He was injured by the state securities who, they bashed and mashed up his genitals while they were interrogating him. But I pray for his healing. I know he's making a lot of progress, and I wish him well.
I can only hope the instruments of power are safe, because I hope they didn't mash it.
I am a Nalongo. I studied and specialized in human sexualities. We can always take care of those instruments.
He's lucky.
My instruments work well, so let us wait for his own to recover, because trauma, I think even beyond the genitals, the mind and the body and the soul can be traumatized much longer than the erection. If erection returns, we still have to work with minds and hopes and souls. But yes, I have a lover, and I love him very much, although he's from the National Unity Platform. So I have a vested interest in Bobi Wine's party. It has to work because my lover is a strong supporter of that party. Yes.
All right, I think Kenyans are trying to try their shots. In Kenya, they shoot their shots; they don't care. So I think they are trying to try their luck.
Polygamy or polyamory is if it can be done by men, it can be done by women. So tell your Kenyan brothers.
There's still chance.
The lover man stayed in Uganda.
So you can still do. You can still have an embassy here.
Gerald, are you single?
Maybe you can have that discussion of. All right, I'm not single. I'm definitely checking. Yeah.
Okay, are you polyamorous?
I've not considered it.
Okay,
I'm
let's
yet to.
talk after. Let's talk with tea afterwards.
Because I was saying actually yesterday in my profile, a lot of Kenyans were trying to shoot their shots. I don't know. Maybe someone could be lucky. Someone could be not. You never know where it could end. Like you said, okay, your heart has 4 chambers. So one, the lover from NUP has taken 1 chamber. We still have 3 chambers left. So the Kenyans can still try.
Do they pay? Like, what's the position on commercial sex work? I could be a commercial sex worker.
Hiya. Dana.
Hiya.
Hey, Stella.
Yeah.
Keep tight. Mugambi Derek says, I'm finished now. Keep tight. Says, Wasomi. Oh, chick is that. Liki Sarah Cheronte saying, behind your eyes lies pain. My prayers to you and your love. They have prayed also for your lover in NUP. So I hope he's safe and he shall keep well. All right. Somebody saying, yeah, Kusha, you're right. I mean, things you never know. Kantola Peteko says only arrogance makes this lady think she can destroy NUB or NUP or Bobby Wine. Brian Kiayemba, Ugandans also Galepo. They don't understand Stella or the few who are benefiting from the regime confuses when the regime confuses the masses. All right. Nyamarema Silvia says, Stella, enjoy ugali and nyama mushomo. That is nyama choma down here. I hope you've taken some. Jeff Jeboy, Gerald Bitok asked her to tell us about the dog she flaunted recently as a new boyfriend. Maybe, okay. I don't want to believe that there's anything going on with the dog. Maybe it was one of the poems again. That's what I want to believe until she disagrees. Stella, the dog, finally.
No. I have a friend. I have a friend called Freddie. He's a dog, and I had a fallout with a number of friends. Deep friendships. People who did not understand that my poems are an offering to the liberation struggle, an offering to Uganda, an offering of love to the world, and they thought because they found my poems very critical that they could gag me and stop me from criticizing Bobby Wine, although I love him and I admire his leadership. And so these friendships become very problematic, and I chose to walk away in order to retain my ability to keep being the critic that I have self-fashioned myself into. And so I walked away from people and I walked to a dog for friendship and loyalty. And the dog, Freddie, does not, he listens to the poems. I read to him the poems. The dog, Freddie, does not walk away from me as long as I'm feeding him. He's my friend. And a number of perverted minds think I am practicing bestiality. I do not support bestiality. I do not believe that I am going to have a sexual relationship with a dog. But for now, in terms of an exilee who has lost friends momentarily because they think they can tell me what to write and what not to write, I would rather have the friendship and company of a dog. And so I'm learning to rest and play and be with an animal. I've had dogs before as guard dogs, but not as pets. And so it's a new experience for me in exile to learn how to work with a dog as a friend. And he's a very good friend. Don't be jealous of Freddie. There's no sex between me and Freddie.
Uh-huh. Okay, I can see Licky is also asking if I'm single. I mean, these girls are shooting their shots straight and fast. Anyway, thank you guys for joining in. I'm not single, and I've not considered is it polygamy or polio, whatever that you've mentioned.
Polyamory, to love many is to be polyamorous.
Okay, so I've not considered yet. So when I consider, maybe I'll give another declaration because I'm seeing people are already asking the question that you asked straight and fast. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. Someone is saying yes, Stella Nyanzi is a strong woman, and amesema Mungu akubariki sana. So I wish you all the very best. That is from Shamira. Dr. Nyanzi is an open-minded and strong woman. As a Ugandan woman, I'm proud of you, Stella. Thank you so much. Nyamera says dogs are friendly. Until next time, Stella, I hope to see you again, especially we talk about the issues on women. I mean, that's a discussion that we need to have in isolation and actually have my try and get to know that what's the progress we're making in terms of empowering our women, and also what is the danger? Are we taking the balance in terms of pushing the women agenda? Do we get a balance also between balancing the women getting up and also ensuring that we have the boy child as well coming in terms of ensuring that these people, we have an equal partnership? Because you've talked about your lover in NUP. If we don't have a lover in NUP in the revolution, we don't empower the men as well, then we might get to a point where we only have women running revolutions and dogs as friends.
I have 2 sons.
Yeah, so we need to empower all of them so that we ensure that we have a good place. Liki Sarah, she wrote your thank you for the platform. Thank you so much, Liki. I'll see you. I don't know if she's from Uganda. I think so. Jamii Telecommunication. All right. I'll see you. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, Nyamira. Thank you, King Kamwere. Since my best honorable Stella. George Okech Koriga, thank you so much for tuning in. And every other tackler who has been online. I really appreciate you. To Stella, I want to wish you a very good stay in Kenya when you feel safe. And when you feel you can interact with some of us, we can always have some nyama choma and ugali has been advised by our rightful audience. So don't worry, Kenyans are very good people. Yeah, we don't have tear gas, we don't clobber people. We are very peaceful and we love visitors. Napenda wageni sana. So karibu Kenya, Stella. Hope to see you soon. Until then, take care of yourself. To the tackle is a tackle. And the tackle ends now. Bye-bye and see you again tomorrow.